What's up everyone? My name is Kelsey. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing a wrap up of everything I read in February. Quick side note, if anyone knows what this hoodie is from, you have my eternal devotion. Alright, in February I read a total of 9 books, 6 young adult, which is strange, and a nice well-rounded 3 5-star, 3 4-star, 3 3-star books. I participated in 2 readathons this month, my first readathons ever. And they went pretty well. So as I go, I'll just tell you what books qualified for what challenges. But first, I have one DNF, which is An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon. I got this from my library as an ebook, and it's about this spaceship, a huge spaceship for an entire civilization, and each deck is basically its own city, and lower decks are basically slave labor for the higher decks. I only got about 97, I got to 97 pages. And I wasn't loving it, but I was going to give it a few more pages and see if it got better for me. But I accidentally hit return to library. There's about an 8-week wait to get the book again, so I'm just calling it a DNF. I wasn't that into it anyways, so it is what it is. My first read of February was The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. I listened to this as an audiobook from my library, and it was amazing. It got 5 stars from me. I read this as the group book for Blackathon, the In This Together challenge. Everyone was challenged to read The Poet X, and I'm so glad it did, because I never would have picked this up without it. It's told in verse, and I don't gravitate towards that, but it tells the story of our main character, Xiomara, or X, and just her life as a teenager growing up in a super religious household with a very strict mother, and her getting into spoken word poetry and slam poetry as an outlet for her emotions. One thing in particular I loved about it was the discussion of religion and how religion and religious households place certain gender expectations on boys and girls, and how much more strict the expectations for girls are than boys. Another thing I loved was Xiomara and her reflections on her own body, and how she is both trying to love and embrace her body, but she also feels ashamed of it because of how other people make her feel. Not only men for objectifying her, but also women for blaming her for the fact that men look at her. I highly recommend the audiobook because Elizabeth Acevedo reads it herself, and she does an amazing job with it. Next up was Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas, or Mass, whatever. This is a huge book. I gave it 3 stars. This is the 3rd book in this series, so I can't really give you a synopsis, but things I did like about it, we got way more character development than in the first 2 books, especially for the main character, Selena, that you meet in book 1. But we also meet new characters. My favorites are Manon and Abraxas. They are amazing, especially Abraxas, who is a dragon. And throughout this whole book, I just picture Abraxas as Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon. For cons in this book, the middle really lagged, and I feel like Sarah J. Maas is not great at fight scenes. They really lag. There's too much detail, and it really slows down the pace of every fight scene. Also, I feel like Selena just like has the hots for every single man she meets, which is weird. Next up is Sawkill Girls by Claire Legrand. This was the team book challenge for the booktube games for Team Ketterdam, and it also is my pick for the Blackathon More Than a Color challenge because one of our main characters, Zoe, is black and asexual. I really enjoyed this book, but I did a full review on it, so I'll link that down below if you want to hear the rest of my thoughts, but I gave it 4 stars. Next is Saga Volume 1 by Brian K. Vaughan. This was for the Blackathon challenge Wakanda Forever, which was to read a comic with a black main character. Saga follows these 2 people from different planets, in different species basically entirely, who fall in love and have a child, and this child is basically illegal, so they're on the run from everyone who wants to capture them and kill their child. I really liked our female lead. I can't remember her name now, and I read this digitally from my library. I also really loved the art style. It's kind of violent, but pretty. My only con was that by the end of the first volume, I wasn't that invested in the story. I have the 2nd volume out from the library right now, and I haven't picked it up because it's not like I need to know what happens. So I only gave it 4 stars. Next up is Dear Martin by Nick Stone. This is about our main character, Justice, who is in his senior year of high school, and at the beginning of the book, he's out late at night trying to get his ex-girlfriend home safe, and he is stopped by a police officer, and the police officer puts him in handcuffs in the backseat of a cop car for no reason. And the rest of the story just follows him as he's dealing with that, with something that's fairly new to him. In the abstract, he's a black kid, and he's always known that this was possible, but it's never happened to him before. And throughout the book, he writes letters to Martin Luther King in order to break down his feelings. So the prose of this book, I love the times when Justice was writing letters to Martin. They're very introspective, and I love the way he broke down Martin Luther King's teachings and how they apply today. I also like the discussions of privilege that take place in the classroom, and I really enjoyed the friendships between these kids and the relationships they have with their teachers, especially Justice and one particular teacher. The cons of this book are that it is not, it's not subtle at all. The themes of the book are very textual. There's no subtext. You don't have to think that hard, which could be a pro. This is a young adult book, so for the target audience, that could be a pro. For me, it was they really hit you over the head with the themes of this book. Another con for me was the dialogue style. At certain points in the book, when a lot of conversation is going back and forth, instead of saying he said, she said, it's written almost like a play. It kind of took me out of the story. So I ended up giving this 4 stars. Next is Illuminate by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. I listened to this on audiobook from my library. It follows 2 main characters after the place they live, this mining community where they live, is attacked by a competing company, and everyone in this community has to flee on these rescue ships. And the story follows them as they're fleeing from this competing company through space. So pros for this book. The plot is really interesting. One of our female main character, Katie, is awesome. I loved her a lot. Her character is very complicated. She's smart, but she's also trying to protect herself, and I really identified with that. The end of the book is super intense, and at the very, very end, not just the climax of the book, the very last couple pages, there is a huge twist that I did not see coming. It is quite the cliffhanger, so I went out and bought the second book immediately. Another thing I enjoyed was the format was interesting. I listened to it on audiobook, so I didn't get the full effect of the format when it's told in found documents. So I think I would actually recommend reading this. I don't know. The audiobook was good. The voice acting was good. One thing that really annoyed me about the audiobook, though, is that I kind of want to find an example in the book to see if they do this. Because in the audiobook, in the book, they black out all of the swearing. What, teenagers don't swear? Or is this supposed to be because these are found documents? It just, this is a young adult book. Teenagers swear. So all throughout the book, all throughout the audiobook, every time they said fuck, it would be we know what you're saying. It drove me nuts because there's a lot of swearing. These are teenagers in life and death situations. They say fuck a lot. Another downside of the audiobook is that because this is told in documents, there's a lot of this date, this time, and then you would go through the whole document, and by the end of it, I forgot what date and time things took place, and we would just move on. So I kind of lost track of what was happening when, and it is chronological, so one thing is happening after another, but it still got confusing. And lastly, downside is it took a long time to get to the main plot of this book. Or the main conflict, that is. I feel the first 2/3 of this book, I just feel a lot of it was unnecessary and could have been cut. So I ended up giving this 3 stars. Next is Becoming by Michelle Obama. It meets the challenge for Blackathon Hear Us, which is any book written by a Black author, Black or African author, and this is just Michelle Obama's memoir. It covers topics from her childhood all the way through her husband's presidency. I really loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. There are stories from her childhood, which I really loved, her growing up and interacting with her family. She talks a lot about the value of education, the importance of empowering young people, especially young Black people from low-income areas. She talks a lot about the importance of family and her relationship with Barack, which was so great. It was really interesting to read about them as a young couple before Barack was in the public eye. And it was interesting because I was a teenager when Barack Obama ran for president for the first time. I voted for him the first time, but I was just on the edge. So I didn't pay attention to primaries. I didn't care about any of that competition because I couldn't vote for it anyways. So I didn't pay any attention until just before the election. And that's when I did all my research. So it was interesting to see stories from that early time in the election. In addition to all the stories and the interesting parts of her life that she wrote about, the writing is just really beautiful. It's not just informative, it's also atmospheric. So yeah, 5 out of 5 stars, would recommend. Next is The Call by Peter O'Gillian. It's Irish. This is another audiobook I listened to from my library. It takes place in Ireland in a society where the Irish have banned fairies to this other world, the Grey World, centuries ago, and now the fairies are getting revenge. Kids aged 10 to 17 are all called, which means they disappear in our world for 3 minutes and 4 seconds and reappear in the fairy world for 24 hours. And they have to run and hide and fight off these fairies in order to make it back alive. And not only do the fairies try to kill them, they also deform them and distort them and torture them. It's like, ugh, it's horrific. So this book follows our main character Nessa and how she is faring in the school, and it follows her journey. Pros for this book are the premise is fascinating and it's horrifying. Like, this is a young adult, it feels like a horror book, which is rare. It was just so interesting to read, and he does not shy away from really gruesome descriptions and really vivid depictions of what these people go through. Like, some of it truly I'm listening and like making disgusted faces because it's just so, like, gives me chills. Another pro is that it was a pretty satisfying ending. Everything is fairly complete. It's a full story arc. So this is a series of books, but it's not a true cliffhanger. Oh, another pro is that our main character is disabled, and you don't see that a lot, especially in a horror book. So she has limited use of her legs. I was a little confused because I'm not super familiar with polio, but it was something to do with polio, and now she's partially paralyzed. The downsides for this book were, like, one of them is very technical, and it's something I noticed from the very beginning, and that is the book is written in third person limited, so you're seeing things only from one character's perspective at a time, but randomly the author would throw in something that the person's perspective that you're in that they couldn't know. So we would be in Nessa's perspective, and then we would suddenly know another character's thoughts. It doesn't make any sense, and it really takes me out of the story. I also thought the character perspectives that we switched to were kind of random, especially towards the end of the book. At the beginning, you're all from Nessa's perspective, and the only time you switch perspectives are when one of the other students is called, and then you see this other world from their perspective and them trying to survive. But towards the end of the book, it's like you're switching perspectives from one person to another in a way you hadn't before, and it seemed kind of random, and again, took me out of the story. So overall, I only ended up giving it 3 stars. 3 stars is not a bad rating, as a reminder. It means it was okay. It just didn't blow my mind. Why are you like this? And the last book I read in February, technically I finished it March 1st, but I'm counting it. I read most of it in February, and that is The 5th Season by N.K. Jemisin. I'm kind of counting this in the Blackathon Feel the Love Challenge. It doesn't quite fit. I'm definitely stretching the meaning of romance in this case. The 5th Season is a fantasy book. Let me say first that I loved this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was amazing. The writing was amazing. The storytelling was great. A little background on the world first. So this is a fantasy society in which it takes place on an Earth-like world where there are people that can control rock. And by rock, I mean rocks, minerals, huge plates in the earth, plate tectonics, that kind of thing, called Origines, these people are. So Essen, our first storyline, is an Origine whose youngest child has been murdered. Her older child is missing, and she's on a mission to find her older child and get revenge for her youngest child. Our second storyline is Cyanite, who is an adult who has been trained by this Empire's society of Origines in order to control her power and be useful. And our third storyline is Demaya, who is a child Origine who has just been discovered and sent to train in this Origine training center. This book was so good. I don't know how much I can say about this book without giving major plot points away, so I'm not going to. Like, seriously, if you like fantasy books, read this book. The writing is astounding. Someone out there thinks he's cool shit. Oh, come on. You've got to be kidding me. If you can't even hear this, I'm gonna look so dumb right now, but that's so annoying. Oh, thank God he turned his car off. Who honks at someone to get them to come out of their house? How rude. Text them or walk up to the door. Okay. Done. Tangenting. No, that fucking music is still on. What a douchebag. Oh, he opened his door. This dude, straight up, got out of the car, clearing his back seat with the music turned all the way up. What is wrong with people? Oh my God. He is in a house. He left his music all the way up and he went in a house. Where even was I? The 5th season. It was amazing. I can't talk too much without giving away major plot points because some of the themes throughout the book are, well, they're obviously very deeply involved in the plot. But I can say that there are themes of family and motherhood, themes of discrimination and bigotry and power and control. I think I already said this. God knows what I even already said because of that guy. But if you like fantasy, you should read this book. Alright, those are all the books I read in February. If you've read any of these, please tell me what you thought of them down in the comments. I'd love to talk about them. If you plan on reading any of these books and have any questions, please let me know. All my links are in the description. If you like this video, hit like. I post book-related videos every Wednesday, so if you want to keep up, subscribe. Otherwise, I'll see you all next week.